Welcome to the War Vault, where we dive into history's greatest battles. Imagine the morning of December 6th, 1921, London. Representatives of the British Empire and Irish revolutionaries sit across from one another at 10 Downing Street. After centuries of British rule, after famine and rebellion, after executions and guerrilla warfare, the unthinkable is happening. Britain is signing away most of Ireland. The Irish Free State will be born, a dominion with its own parliament, its own flag, its own army. 26 counties will leave the United Kingdom. Only 6 in the north will remain. For an empire that controlled a quarter of the globe, that had crushed rebellions from India to Africa to the Caribbean, this was surrender. Not defeat on the battlefield, but political capitulation. The treaty was signed under duress, threatened with immediate and terrible war if refused. Irish negotiator Michael Collins called it his own death warrant. He was right. Within months, Ireland descended into civil war, and Collins himself was assassinated. But Britain? Britain walked away, and here lies the puzzle. Why didn't the British Empire, flush with victory in World War I, controlling the world's most powerful navy, simply retake Ireland when the Free State began to drift toward full independence? Why didn't Britain crush the IRA when it reformed in the 1960s? Why didn't Britain reconquer the South during the Troubles when bombs exploded in London, Birmingham, and Manchester? The answer is not what most expect. It was not weakness. It was not sentiment. It was a series of calculated decisions shaped by cost, politics, and the brutal realization that some territories cannot be held, no matter how much power you possess. This is the story of why Britain let Ireland go and never came back. To understand why Britain never retook Ireland, we must first understand what it lost and what it kept. The Anglo-Irish Treaty of 1921 did not grant Ireland full independence. It created the Irish Free State, a dominion within the British Commonwealth, similar in status to Canada or Australia. Members of the new Irish Parliament would swear an oath of allegiance to the British Crown. Britain retained control of 3 deep-water ports, Queenstown, Bearhaven, and Lough Swilly, for naval defense. And crucially, 6 counties in the northeast, Ulster, remained part of the United Kingdom as Northern Ireland. From London's perspective, this was not total defeat. It was a compromise. Ireland was partitioned. The industrialized Protestant majority north stayed British. The agrarian Catholic majority south gained autonomy, but remained tied to the empire. British strategists believed this arrangement could hold. What they did not anticipate was how quickly the Irish Free State would begin severing those ties. Within a decade, the Free State stopped paying land annuities to Britain. It abolished the oath of allegiance. It removed the British Governor-General's power. And in 1937, it adopted a new constitution that declared Ireland, not the Free State, but Ireland, a sovereign, independent, and democratic state. The name Éire replaced the Free State. By 1949, Ireland left the Commonwealth entirely and declared itself a republic. The final threads connecting it to Britain were cut. At each of these steps, voices in Britain called for intervention. Hardliners argued that Ireland was sliding toward full independence in violation of the treaty. Military options were discussed. The Royal Navy still held those treaty ports. British intelligence still operated in Ireland. And the British Army, though reduced after World War I, was still formidable. So why didn't Britain act? The first reason was cost. The Irish War of Independence, fought from 1919 to 1921, had been a nightmare for Britain. It was not a conventional war with clear front lines and decisive battles. It was guerrilla warfare, ambushes, assassinations, intelligence operations, and reprisals that turned public opinion, both in Ireland and internationally, against Britain. The Irish Republican Army, though small and poorly armed, had learned to fight in ways that neutralized British military superiority. They struck at night, targeted isolated police barracks and supply convoys, and melted into the civilian population. British forces, unable to distinguish insurgent from civilian, resorted to increasingly brutal tactics. The Black and Tans, a paramilitary force recruited to reinforce the police, became infamous for their violence. They burned towns, shot civilians, and carried out reprisal killings. The most notorious incident occurred on November 21, 1920, Bloody Sunday. In the morning, IRA operatives assassinated 14 British intelligence officers in Dublin. In the afternoon, Black and Tans opened fire on a crowd at a Gaelic football match, killing 14 civilians. The cycle of violence was unsustainable. British public opinion, already weary from World War I, turned against the war. The press published stories of atrocities. Labor unions refused to handle military supplies destined for Ireland. Even King George V, in a speech opening the Northern Ireland Parliament in 1921, called for reconciliation and peace. The cost in blood, money, and political capital had become unbearable. Reconquering Ireland after 1922 would have meant fighting that war all over again. Only this time, the IRA would be better organized, better armed, and fighting on home soil with the support of a population that had tasted independence. British politicians understood this. Retaking Ireland was not a matter of winning battles. It was a matter of occupying a hostile nation indefinitely. And that was a cost Britain could not afford. There was also the international dimension. By the 1920s, Britain's global standing was shifting. World War I had drained the empire financially and militarily. The United States had emerged as the world's largest economy and creditor. Britain owed America billions, and American public opinion, shaped heavily by Irish American communities, was sympathetic to Irish independence. President Woodrow Wilson's principle of self-determination, articulated at the end of World War I, resonated powerfully with Irish nationalists. If peoples in Eastern Europe deserved independence from empires, why not Ireland? The British government, desperate to maintain good relations with Washington, could not ignore this pressure. Invading Ireland in the 1920s or 1930s would have provoked international condemnation, particularly from the United States. At a time when Britain was trying to stabilize the post-war order and manage its overstretched empire, alienating America over Ireland was strategically unwise. The League of Nations, though weak, provided another forum where Britain's actions could be scrutinized. Ireland, once independent, could appeal to the League, framing British intervention as imperial aggression. Britain, which prided itself on being a defender of international law and order, would have faced embarrassing questions about why it was reconquering a former dominion. Then there was the question of precedent. If Britain reconquered Ireland, what message would that send to other dominions? Canada, Australia, South Africa, and New Zealand all enjoyed significant autonomy within the Commonwealth. If Britain demonstrated that independence could be reversed by force, it risked destabilizing the entire imperial system. The Commonwealth was held together not by coercion, but by shared interests, culture, and voluntary association, at least in theory. Reconquering Ireland would shatter that fiction. The most immediate constraint, however, was partition. Northern Ireland remained part of the United Kingdom. It was Protestant majority, industrialized and economically integrated with Britain. Its population was fiercely loyal to the Crown and deeply opposed to unification with the Catholic South. Any attempt to reconquer the Irish Free State would have required using Northern Ireland as a base of operations, but doing so would have inflamed sectarian tensions within Northern Ireland itself. The Catholic minority in the north, roughly one-third of the population, sympathized with the South and opposed British rule. Launching a war from Northern Ireland would likely have triggered internal conflict, turning the north into a battleground. British strategists understood this. Northern Ireland was not a stable platform for reconquest. It was a fragile compromise, a region where two communities coexisted uneasily under British sovereignty. Disturbing that balance risked losing not only the south, but the north as well, and losing Northern Ireland was unthinkable. Its strategic location, its ports, and its industrial capacity, especially shipbuilding in Belfast, were valuable. More importantly, abandoning Northern Ireland would have been seen as a betrayal of the Unionist population that had remained loyal to Britain. For all these reasons, Britain chose restraint. The Irish Free State drifted toward full independence, and Britain watched, but did not intervene. By the time World War II began, the question of reconquest had become moot. Ireland declared neutrality in the war, a decision that infuriated Winston Churchill, but one he ultimately accepted. Britain needed Ireland's ports desperately, especially after the fall of France, left Britain standing alone against Germany. Churchill considered seizing the ports by force, but he refrained. The political and military costs were too high. Instead, Britain negotiated, securing limited cooperation from Ireland, including intelligence sharing, and the quiet return. Ireland's neutrality held, and Britain survived the war without reconquering its neighbor. Of Allied airmen who crashed in Irish territory. After World War II, the logic of restraint only deepened. Ireland formally became a republic in 1949, leaving the Commonwealth and severing all constitutional ties to Britain. Yet Britain did not react with force. Why? Because by this point, the empire itself was crumbling. India, the jewel of the empire, gained independence in 1947. Palestine, Egypt, and other colonies were slipping away. Britain was exhausted, financially broken, and dependent on American aid through the Marshall Plan. The age of empire was ending, and everyone knew it. Retaking Ireland, a developed European nation with international recognition, would have been not just costly, but absurd. It would have marked Britain as a relic of a bygone era, clinging to imperial fantasies while the world moved toward decolonization. Moreover, Ireland was no longer a security threat. It was a stable, democratic republic with no ambitions beyond its borders. Trade between Britain and Ireland continued. Irish citizens could live and work in Britain freely under the Common Travel Area, an arrangement that predated both nations' independence. The relationship was complicated, marked by historical grievances and mutual suspicion, but it was manageable. There was no strategic reason to reconquer Ireland, and every reason not to. Then came the Troubles. Ever wondered why Britain, with one of the world's most powerful militaries, never tried to reconquer Ireland, especially when things got really bad? It's a fascinating question, and the answer tells us a lot about modern history, power, and politics. Let's rewind to the late 1960s. Northern Ireland was a powder keg. The Catholic minority faced systematic discrimination from the Protestant-led government. They started demanding basic civil rights, but their protests were met with brutal crackdowns by the police. The situation spiraled out of control. In 1969, the British Army was sent in to restore order. This was supposed to be a short peacekeeping mission. Instead, it became the start of a 30-year conflict known as the Troubles. This chaos breathed new life into the Irish Republican Army, or IRA. The Provisional IRA, a new faction, launched a violent campaign to drive Britain out of Northern Ireland and create a united Ireland. Bombings, assassinations, and shootings became a terrifying part of daily life. They targeted British soldiers, police, politicians, and civilians. The violence wasn't contained to Northern Ireland. It spilled over into the Republic of Ireland and even mainland Britain. In 1974, IRA bombs in Birmingham killed 21 people. In 1979, they assassinated Lord Mountbatten, a member of the royal family. They even came close to killing Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher in a hotel bombing in 1984. The Troubles claimed over 3,500 lives in a brutal, confusing conflict with no clear front lines. So, with all this chaos, why didn't Britain just invade the Republic of Ireland and end it once and for all? Well, the simple answer is, the Republic wasn't the enemy. The IRA operated on both sides of the border, but the Irish government in Dublin didn't support them. In fact, Dublin actively worked with London to fight the IRA, sharing intelligence and arresting suspects. The Irish government might have hoped for a united Ireland one day, but they strongly opposed the IRA's violent methods. They knew that destabilizing Northern Ireland was in nobody's interest. Invading the Republic would have been a strategic nightmare. The IRA's main strongholds were in the Catholic neighborhoods of Belfast and Derry in Northern Ireland, not in the south. A full-scale invasion wouldn't have stamped out the insurgency. It would have just expanded the war zone across the entire island. British military planners were smart enough to see this. The IRA wasn't a conventional army you could defeat in a battle. It was a network of hidden cells, deeply embedded in local communities, fueled by generations of grievances. The British government realized that defeating the IRA wasn't about military conquest. It was about politics. They needed to address the root causes of the violence. So, while the military was used to contain the bloodshed, the real goal was always a political settlement. That groundbreaking moment finally came in 1998 with the Good Friday Agreement. This agreement was a masterpiece of compromise. It recognized the rights and identities of both Unionists who wanted to stay in the UK and nationalists who wanted a united Ireland. It created a power-sharing government in Northern Ireland and, crucially, established that the future of Ireland would be decided by the people through votes, not by violence. The Good Friday Agreement officially ended the Troubles. It also made the idea of Britain reconquering the Republic completely obsolete. Britain agreed that if the people of Northern Ireland ever voted to join the Republic, they would accept it. And if they voted to stay in the UK, the Republic would accept that too. The ballot box had replaced the gun. Today, the thought of Britain retaking Ireland sounds absurd. The two countries are close partners. Their economies are deeply connected, and their people travel freely between them. While Brexit has created new challenges, especially around the Irish border, the peace has held. But asking this question reveals a deeper truth about power. Britain didn't retake Ireland because it couldn't. It wasn't about a lack of military muscle. Invading would have been a strategic disaster, politically impossible and morally wrong. The cost in lives, money, and international reputation would have been astronomical, far outweighing any possible benefit. The story of Britain and Ireland is really a story of strategic restraint. Britain learned a hard lesson. Some places just can't be held by force. Ireland, with its fierce history of resistance and strong national identity, was one of them. Trying to reconquer it would be like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the more you lose. This lesson wasn't unique to Britain and Ireland. Throughout the 20th century, empires across the globe discovered that the age of colonial rule was over. Nationalism and the desire for self-determination were forces that could no longer be contained. Britain, France, Belgium, Portugal, they all had to learn this, some more painfully than others. Ireland was one of Britain's first and most important lessons. The Irish War of Independence in the early 1920s proved that a determined insurgency could make occupation too costly, even for the world's biggest empire. Every time Britain might have considered retaking Ireland in the decades that followed, the math was always the same. The costs were too high, and the benefits were non-existent. So, step by step, Ireland transitioned from a dominion within the British Empire to a fully independent republic. And Britain, realizing it had no other choice, let it go. This wasn't a sign of weakness, it was a recognition of reality. Some wars just can't be won, and sometimes the smartest move is to walk away. So why did Britain never reconquer Ireland? Because it would have cost more than it was worth. Because the world had changed. and because great powers cannot hold onto nations that refuse to be held. Britain lost Ireland not in one big battle, but over a century of small decisions, each one acknowledging that reconquest was impossible. In the end, that painful recognition allowed both nations to move on, Ireland to its freedom and Britain unburdened from the impossible task of holding it. It's a powerful story about how power must sometimes bow to reality, and how letting go could be the strongest move of all. Thanks for watching. If you found this interesting, be sure to like and subscribe for more deep dives into history.